That was a really smart move. Thank you, Zoe or Angie, whoever hit recording. It's always fun. I've always maintained that the recording notification is the most obtrusive thing to presentations. You know, you're in the moment, you're getting started, and all of a sudden, recording in progress. So that was a perfect timing like that. Thank you. Working like a well-oiled machine. Great job. All right, team, we're going to go ahead and get started here. And I want to thank everybody again for giving us some of your time this afternoon to talk a little bit more about leveling up our skills, those cognitive skill sets for your sales athletes. This is a term that is used very deliberately. Many of us on this call, many of us have experience and background in athletics and or have a background and have been in sales as well. And we think there's a lot of parallels there and fundamental behaviors and skill sets that can drive sales performance if we look at what's working for folks from the sports psychology side, from the military side, and from some of the other professional sectors that we have there. Our agenda for today, we'll get through some objectives and some administration here in a second, introduce our speakers, and then we're going to dig into two fundamental skill sets when we think about the cognitive side of developing our salespeople and having them be more successful. The energy management side, and Dr. Winter is going to do a great job walking us through what that looks like. Rob's going to talk about what is the sales application of that looks like, and then how do we command our focus? How can we be in that moment? And that goes hand in hand with energy management. And then, of course, we're going to take questions here along the way. A reminder again to please use the Q&A tool. If you've got questions along the way, we'll be able to answer them in the motion as the webinar is going forward. If we have all done our job today, you will be able to do three things at the end of this webinar. You'll be able to better understand this relationship between performance, psychology, and sales, be able to understand the role of managing energy and how to restore that energy regularly. So we're going to give you some skills that you can use there, an actual practical application that you can do right here in the moment on this webinar, or use later on and or give to your team along the way. Just very simple. And then we're going to finish with an objective that you would leave understanding the power of focus, and then how can you refocus when you're distracted. Today, especially with the technology that we have all around us, it's so easy to be distracted by that. And I think you're going to be amazed by some of the science Dr. Winter is going to present. I want to offer one note here on this presentation. Higher Echelon is a science company. There's a lot of folks with very, very fancy acronyms behind their names there, including Dr. Winter. And what we've done with this webinar is try to scope it accordingly to keep it simple, high level. We look forward to sharing a lot of the science and the research behind this, but we've eliminated a lot of that for this webinar to keep it more practical and high level so that you can envision what this might look like for your team going forward. Okay. So Rob, why don't you kick it off with an introduction and then we'll take it from there.
Perfect, Troy. Thanks so much. Appreciate the introduction today. So my name's Rob Flynn. I'm a senior sales consultant here with Higher Echelon, working with the Human Capital Solutions team. I've got several decades of experience in numerous sales, marketing, and sales enablement type roles. I've worked with several smaller companies, as well as a lot of the big guys like a General Electric and most recently Philips Healthcare. So my background is I've got a bachelor's of science in human factors engineering from the United States Air Force Academy, and with a master's in human resource management from Hawaiian Pacific University. I'll now hand over to my much more detailed and accredited counterpart here, Angie Winter, to give her background.
Thanks, Rob. So I'm the Director of Leadership Development for Human Capital Solutions at Higher Echelon. I've been here for almost 5 years, and my job includes managing programs, leading teams. I'm a subject matter expert. I develop curriculum, I deliver workshops, and I also assist our proposal team on winning new work. I have a PhD and a master's degree in sport and performance psychology, and I also am a certified mental performance consultant and an ICF certified executive coach. But that's enough about me. Let's talk a little bit about Higher Echelon. So Higher Echelon is an organizational excellence firm that focuses on the intersection of people, processes, and technology. And we have a lot of trusted partners out there, both in the government world and in commercial work. Some notable ones just to take a look at are NASA and the Army Talent Management Task Force. And then from the commercial side, we partner with a lot of healthcare technology companies, including Philips, Stryker, and many, many others. So to start this off and to kind of get us in the mindset for what we're going to talk about today, I really became interested in this field of sport and performance psychology as a competitive athlete myself. And I was observing how the mental game affected performance, how not always the best athlete won every competition. And what I discovered in college was that there's a whole field of study on sport and performance psychology. And then I went on to grad school and I started my career working with athletes of all levels on developing and enhancing their mindset in order to reach their peak potential. One of my very first jobs was at the United States Military Academy at West Point, where I worked in the Center for Enhanced Performance with cadet athletes, coaches, and also Army officers on how to be their best on a more consistent basis. And while I was still spending time with a lot of athletes and engaged in a lot of sports, it really became clear to me that there's a transfer of sport and performance psychology skills to other performance domains. The cadets were asking me, "Hey, how can I bring these same ideas to pre-ranger school this summer? Or I have sapper school coming up. How can I make sure that my mind is right before I even get there?" So it got me thinking that there's a lot more to sport and performance psychology than just keeping it within sport. And interestingly, the Army has been utilizing performance psychology for the past 20 years, and now nearly all the other branches and specialty units have followed suit. And actually, the US military is the largest employer of sport and performance psychology consultants across the world. So, as I've mentioned, this field has really transferred across a lot of other domains, including the medical field, to numerous disciplines, including surgeons, surgical teams, nurses, trauma, ER teams, just to name a few. And that takes us to today. And in my career now, I've expanded my background to work across domains into the business professionals, where I work with sales teams, C-suite leaders, and I do a lot of executive coaching. And really, what we're seeing is that there's such a strong transfer of some of the things that athletes experience when they're performing across the aisle to the sales domain that we're actually going to utilize the term sales athlete. So, Rob, why don't you explain a little bit more about what a sales athlete is and what our attendees today can think that will mean?
Sure. Appreciate that, Angie. So, again, as a sales athlete, are we holding the life of a patient in your hand? No. Are we having, shots coming in during a special forces, unit engagement? No. But if you've been a salesperson or carried the bag for any length of time, maybe you've got that deal that is hinging on the company making their number at the end of the quarter. That comes with its own special pressure. And quite frankly, we're talking performance. Salespeople are paid on that performance. So there is tremendous pressure, and that's again we start to see these aspects really align and have parallels. So we've got the kind of a performance triangle here. I want to talk through this with you. So if you think about most organizations, and again, the ones I've all been with over the years, there's always a focus on, we'll call it, you see the bottom part of the triangle, the people, content, and process that they look at to be their foundational elements. What do we mean by that? It really tends to be product training. Hey, we've got the new widget that's coming out. We need you all smart on it. Makes sense. You got to have those kinds of things. Process. How are we functioning with our CRM? What sales methodology are we going to be implementing this year for the organization? What never really gets done, because it tends to run out of time, or is that mental and emotional piece. So let's take a look and let's actually flip the script. So I'll pause on that for just a half second. All right. So what we see kind of from a higher echelon perspective is a little bit of a change in focus with this. Instead of kind of having that content and process that we talked about, it's what do we do to get the salespeople more established and effective? If you do that, the other pieces that we see at the top have a much better chance of being more effective and efficient as they drive in the organization. So it's that focusing on that mental and emotional for those people and developing that, which quite frankly, if you do that, you're giving folks skill sets that'll take them through the rest of their career, as opposed to a methodology which tends to be as good as the company you're working with. And then if you change companies, well, you're probably moving to a different methodology. So those are a little more in the transactional piece. And this is one thing that we don't see really happening here in the marketplace these days on a regular basis.
Sure, I understand what you're saying. The traditional way of doing sales training, and this is coming to you as a leader from a sales training organization right now. Most people focus on just let me find the right people, let me equip you with the knowledge you need to have, and maybe I'll teach you a sales process. But we don't do anything to equip people on the cognitive performance side. How can you be the best version of you in executing that sales process with that content? And what Higher Echelon does is they kind of flip that script. Yes, people are still the focus, but in order to create a better person that can receive that training and put it into practice, we focus on that mental and that emotional resiliency, mindset, aptitude, those aspects like that. Am I summarizing that correctly?
You've got that dead on. Correct, Troy.
Fantastic,
Exactly.
fantastic. So do you have a slide that walks us through what this, here it is, look at that right now. Thank you.
So if you think about organizations, where are your teams today? And this is, again, folks kind of tend to be all over the spectrum when it comes to it. You've got new rookies that maybe are uncomfortable, much more the sweaty palms before they're going into their first board meeting. Maybe it's your veteran sales guys that are cherry picking accounts and maybe a little less motivation because, quite frankly, they're making their number, but they're not really pushing themselves to that next level to really hit that higher echelon with regards to sales quotas. What we're trying to show you is give you the skill sets that'll allow folks to kind of have that self-motivation, have that increased productivity, more of that confidence so that they're showing up efficiently and effectively and therefore having a more larger impact within the organizations. So let me now kind of turn it back over to Angie. Angie, talk through a little more of the science, if you would, for us on this.
Sure. So as Troy mentioned, we have a comprehensive resilient and adaptable leader program, and we've taken that resilient and adaptable leader program and narrowed it down to sales. So our Rail for Sales curriculum really focuses on 5 key topics, and these topics include training adaptive thinking, regulating your energy, making sure that you can command your focus, planning out your goals, and then also just being really prepared mentally. For the purpose of today and for our webinar, what we want to do is give you just a sneak peek of 2 of those skills. So we're going to focus the rest of today around energy management and commanding your attention. And we picked those 2 because there's something that everybody can relate to. And it's also something that's not only going to make you hopefully a better salesperson, but we want this to be able to help you personally as well. So let's get right into the energy management piece. So energy management, it's kind of like if you think of your cell phone. And I mean, we're all attached to them. We've got them all the time. But that cell phone battery is not something that we can always count on, right? The more that we use that phone, and if we don't charge it, the quicker the battery goes down. And so our energy is very similar. Our energy is finite. It also needs to be charged. It's not something that we can just expend, and think that there are no consequences. There are absolutely consequences for us to continuously expend energy. So something we need to think about is how do we restore that energy? And not only at the very end of the day or the very end of the quarter or when we go on vacation, we need to be constantly restoring energy. So that's something we'll get into in a minute. The other thing I wanted to mention here is that energy is not the same as stress, but the 2 are very related. So stress is something that weighs on us, that pulls on us. And the more stress we're under, the more energy we may be expending doing maybe even the same task. So it's as if our cell phone, think of when your battery, how your battery behaves when you have 10 apps open all at the same time, it's draining your battery a lot faster than if you just have one open. So another way that we can think about this is kind of like this wave here, okay, our sine wave. And there's going to be moments throughout our day where we have to expend energy. And sometimes it's a quick burst of energy. But what we want to really focus on is how do we have some little bursts of restoring our energy as well as taking our energy. So that's how I want you to think about this. We expend energy, we restore. We maybe have a big expenditure, then a little restore. Another expenditure, restore. So that's the way we're going to think about energy throughout the rest of the webinar today. Rob, can you talk a little bit about maybe how salespeople might view energy?
Sure. Just an example came up yesterday. I was just having a conversation with somebody, had a big meeting coming up. I was preparing for it the night before, prepared for it the next morning, getting all my facts aligned, and then, had my hour-long meeting where I was, delivering the content, having deep discussions. And then luckily I did not schedule something back to back because as salespeople, we tend to see if there's white space on our calendar. We're looking for something to go into it. I noticed immediately following that hour-long meeting, my energy level just dropped. I was going into a recovery session, and it became very aware. And the fact that we had this webinar coming up, I was like, wow. It was something that was just really clear cut. But I took that time, I did the recovery, and I was rallied back shortly thereafter. But I'm I'm glad. Unfortunately, it was a little by luck that I didn't have something scheduled, because again, I tend to be a little more back to back. And what you're talking about here is so smarter, and just seeing how you actually do need to take that time to have that recovery so that you have those ebbs and flows with the energy content.
Thanks for that example, Rob. And truly, there are a lot of things that we can do to balance our energy. What we're going to do is focus on one key tool, something simple and easy that we can incorporate into your everyday. So our sales athlete tool for energy management is something called the game time pause. Okay, the game time pause is essentially a deep breath, but game time pause makes it a little bit more salesy. And I also want you to think about it in terms of preparing and readying yourself for performance. So let's actually practice it right now. What I want everybody to do, whatever you're doing, some of you are listening and maybe doing something else. We'll talk about that in the focus section. But what I want you to do right now is just kind of put everything else away. Okay, put down your phone, click out of your email for a second, and go ahead and sit up nice and tall in your chair. Put your feet flat on the floor. Let your hands just rest in your lap. We're going to slow things down. If you'd like to close your eyes, you're welcome to close your eyes. What I want you to do is nice and slow, nice and deliberately. We're going to inhale for 4 seconds. Inhaling through the nose. Holding for 2. And exhale for 4. All right, go ahead and shake it out. Come on back to normal and reality. So what we did just there was we took a pause. Okay, but there was something deeper than just pausing. And there's a ton of science behind a good deep breath and what actually happens for us. So first of all, as we slow things down, we lower our heart rate, we lower our blood pressure, we get more oxygen to our brain, which allows us to make a better decision, to think more clearly. We actually even reduce our blood lactate. And so all of those things are really good for physical performance, but they're really good for mental performance as well. And some of our performances are a combination of physical and mental. We're standing up presenting to a hopefully future client. There's a physical piece to it too. And we want to make sure our physiology is in check and in our control. So there's a lot of power in this deep intentional breath.
Angie, I
Rob,
think
what
it's
is,
easy.
yeah, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, it's so easy to reflect on the athletes, these images we see, the field goal kicker, who you see that breath, their shoulders up, just like you said, and then exhale, or maybe the soccer player who's kicking the penalty kick or something like that. But it's so evident. I just, in my background in surgery, I've seen surgeons do the same thing. They will take that deep breath before they make the primary incision. It's amazing to see how much, and I don't even think we think about this, but probably the most prevalent is an example. I had a sales rep in New York, and he absolutely loved the negotiation. Just loved it when he knew he was going to get hammered on price. And before he would go in, I never realized until he just explained it, Dr. Winter. He would take that deep breath, he'd get done, and then he had 100% focus and 100% energy. Like he was all about that conversation. There was nothing else that was sapping. He closed all the apps, all the other programs that were open, and he was in that moment right there. It's just, I never connected those dots like that. Thank you. That's very helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. Rob, do you want to take us through a sales type example here?
Sure. Well, Troy, I'm going to piggyback on what you just said,
Yeah.
kind of from a sales negotiation. So let's take a little bit of one scoop of some sales methodology or sales technique, and then combine it with what Angie just shared with us here too. Salespeople tend to like to talk. They don't like dead air. So oftentimes during sales meetings or negotiations, they will fill that dead air with words. Sometimes those words can be concessions before it's time to give a concession. So I used to sell in New York City. That's its own unique creature unto itself. I was in the middle of a pricing discussion with a customer for a very large, very expensive piece of equipment. And so what I did, instead of filling the dead air after I dropped the price in front of him and was waiting for his reaction, I actually used the game time pause technique to kind of just take a breath, pause, and not fill that space. Allowed me to kind of recenter and kind of get ready to kind of for the next wave in the negotiations, because we were going to negotiate. But I didn't wind up saying anything. I didn't wind up giving extra concessions. And actually, I was better for the, like I said, for the back half of that dialogue. And actually, I came out of that stronger than I had in some of my other negotiations prior. So it was a great use of what you just described, Angie, to kind of take us, get that in there, but then also use that with the sales technique as well to get what I was trying to get done for that deal. All right. Well, let's take a look and just kind of, let's go look through kind of what Angie shared with us here for, overall with managing your energy. Troy, if you can kick us ahead here on the next slide. Thank you, sir. So first off, think about creating a routine. And again, starting your day with a game time pause. I don't know if you're like me, but as soon as you kind of wake up and if you've had a busy day the day before, that chaos starts jumping into your head very quickly. Think about just kind of using that before you even get out of bed, or maybe as you're just kind of, before you brush your teeth and you're getting ready to kind of either hit the gym for a workout or hit the computer. Take advantage of that. you know, do a game time pause maybe before you go into every sales call, kind of like the example Troy gave, or even during, like the one I gave. Use it to your advantage. You think about using it every day, and not just, you can use it in a success format as well as failure. So if something's going really well, don't get too far ahead of yourself, and also if something's going off the rails, use that to kind of not let things go into too much of a chaos and keep yourself in that center line. So I think these are some things you can think about, you could use immediately starting later on after you jump off the call with us, and I think will really serve you well. So Angie, I'll hand it back to you. Let's go ahead and maybe jump into our next topic.
Yes, sure. So we're going to spend the rest of our time talking about the next skill, which is commanding your attention. And this skill really is about focus. So commanding your attention, it's all about focusing on the right thing at the right time. Now, we might have a lot of right things. So let's say we have 10 competing number one priorities. Well, how do you decide which one do I work on? And which one do I start with? Where do I go first? And then we've got to juggle those along with all of the constant distractions and interruptions that are just inherent to our work world. So if you kick it to the next slide, let's talk a little bit about the science behind focus. And I think this is it's fascinating to me. From a focus perspective, the human brain can only really focus on one thing at a time. And so if you think about the neurons in your brain, we can't dedicate, well, these neurons over here, I'm going to put on an email. And these neurons over here, I'm going to assign to a phone conversation and do them both at the same time. We think we can. We think we're good at multitasking. But what's really happening in the brain is that we're shifting back and forth. Now, we can get good at shifting. Okay? And many of you are probably thinking, I'm a great multitasker. And like I said, we can get great at shifting. However, there is room for error. So what can happen is as we're shifting back and forth, we shift and we come back to a different spot. Or we shift back and our language is still, our audio is still on that last piece. So that's when we start saying what we were typing or typing what we were saying. And so really it's not important to remember that the brain can only focus on one thing at a time. The other thing that's important with this is if we are in deep focus, which is where we are solely focused in on one task, we can't stay there forever. Okay? We can stay there for the window is about 20 minutes. And after about 20 minutes, our brain reaches something called cognitive overload and we start to shut down. We can't take any more in. So I just want you to keep those things in mind as we think about focus and not only how long we can focus, but then being able to shift our focus appropriately back and forth. So in terms of maximizing our focus, what do we do in order to make this the best? Well, first off, we need to identify what it is that we need to focus on. So an acronym that we use here is WIN. What's important now? What is that number one thing of the number one things that I need to get done? Okay, and maybe we base that on when it's due, on how fresh we are, on who's able to help us, what resources we have, but identify what it is that I need to focus on. Sometimes we've got those 10 different priorities and we're doing a little bit here, a little bit here, a little bit here. We're likely going to make a mistake somewhere. Okay, so figure out what it is to focus on. And then aim to complete your work when your brain is works the best. So know yourself. Some of us are really, really good in first thing in the morning. So when we feel the freshest, we're able to knock a lot of good deep workout. Others of us are really good at the end of the day or right before bed. So figure out what and assign those tasks, those time frames so that you maximize your focus. The other thing that we can do, knowing that we're going to have distractions, is minimize them. So just work on reducing. We're not going to make them go away. Okay, so don't think that we can do that, but we can reduce. So one way to reduce is let's just shut off alerts. Okay, so alerts, we might be getting them on our watch. We might be getting them on our email. We might be getting them on our phone. We have all three of those things happening at the same time. We're going to get pulled away constantly. So maybe we turn off our alerts on our email.Maybe we silence the notifications on our phone. Maybe we just take the watch off for that 20 minutes. So again, it's not for the whole day, but it's during that deep work time. The other thing is know you're going to get distracted even with this work and help yourself to refocus. Okay, so getting back to that thing that's important now. All right, so here is our sales athlete tool for commanding your attention. And this is called the AIR technique. So the acronym stands for aware, interrupt, and replace. Aware is recognizing that I am no longer focused. I'm no longer in control. The interrupt is find a way to let it go. Okay, the interrupt can be anything. It can be taking the game time pause. It can be maybe making a fist with your hand, squeezing it and releasing it. Maybe it's shrugging and squeezing your shoulders up to your ears and letting them go. Okay. Maybe it's visualizing a stop sign, like stop surfing the web and come back to what I was supposed to be doing. And then the R is replace. And replace is about what do I need to get back to? Okay. So if you were interrupted during that deep work, pull yourself back to it. Or if you found yourself amongst all those 10 different number one priorities, stop, pull yourself back. Which one's the most important right now? Okay, so Rob, how about you walk us through an AIR example for sales?
Sure. So again, trying to think in terms of customer meetings. Many of us are trying to get moved higher up in the organization. We try and get our executive C-suite level meetings. Several of the ones I've had when you're dealing with these individuals is you'll be in the middle of your dialogue, and there's a competing priority for the exec that comes in. They have to take a quick call. Emergencies going on at the organization that they need to address. Now, hopefully, that doesn't completely take them out, but it may for a few minutes. So kind of be aware that you're not in control of how that exec is going to respond within your meeting. Letting go that they're going to take that other item because that's the pressing item for them for the day. But then the other way to kind of bring everybody back is that replace segment, where take a moment, do a quick review of where you were so that your discussion doesn't wander, and you allow the executive to get recentered with the conversation that you're going to have. And yeah, maybe you need to modify and trim it up because you've lost a little bit of time, but that allows your meeting to then get back on focus. So you're trying to achieve the impact that you were trying to have when you started. So
We just find this so amazing when we think of this. It's obviously both win and air are simple. And I know that higher echelon, that's an entire workshop on how to do that, how to identify priorities, how to shift, how to be aware, and then to refocus like that along the way. But I can't help but call out the contrast with corporate America today, where the expectation is everything is important and everything is multitasking and you're expected to do that. But yet I look at those people who are successful in corporate America and they had that singular ability to say, this is the priority. This is what I'm going to work on now. I'm going to complete this to the best of my ability before I work and go to the next thing. And it's something I know I'm going to refocus on my teams on how to find that what's important now and then be able to stay in the moment on that. It's a great point. Very helpful.
thank you, Troy. Appreciate that. So guys, let me just kind of wrap it up here before I hand over to Angie to kind of bring us all the way home. So if we look at kind of that command your attention, a couple things to think about. As Angie mentioned, practice that focusing for a short period of time. If you understand the science behind this, and again, this is what we want to keep going back to, the science behind performance. If your brain can do a deeper dive for 20 minutes, yeah, don't be unrealistic. Think about how you schedule your calendar. Don't be unrealistic with putting that you're going to be able to do it for an hour. You're not. Your brain, that's not the way your brain works. Think about that as you kind of go through your tasks that you're trying to accomplish. Minimize the distractions. We've all talked about it. I mean, again, just do an exercise. Many of you are salespeople on this call or sales trainers. How many screens do you have open in front of you at the moment? Angie talked about it. I usually have at least 3 computer screens, a phone, and yeah, I have the watch too. How many of those are just, trying to get your attention for something of which you've set up to actually designed it to distract you? That is half of the point of these devices. Practice the AIR technique. I gave you an example how you can kind of use that in a sales environment, but again, you can use that individually as you're going through your tasks on a regular basis. And setting the reminder, remind yourself to look back to these things as far as how you're executing. And again, we get distracted by different things. Give you that reminder to bring yourself back and allow yourself to be recentered. So, Angie, why don't I hand it back over to you to kind of bring us home here?
Sure. So just from a summary perspective here, leveling up your sales is all about maximizing your mental game. And that's, in addition to your sales skills and processes. So this is stuff that you can do to help yourself be your best, no matter what your sales methodology is. The 2 tools we talked about are managing your energy and commanding your attention. And with the managing our energy, know that we need to balance our energy expenditure with some energy restoration. So that's something that we can do throughout the day. And one tool that we wanted you to take away from today was using the game time pause. When it comes to commanding your attention, know that you can identify what that most important thing is to shift your focus onto, and then minimize the distractions and use the air technique as you do recognize what's getting in your way from being focused, and get yourself back through the process of refocusing. And I'll send it back over to Troy to take any questions.
Yeah, Angie, thank you so much. And thank you, Rob. Great practical examples there from the sales world. Team, I would ask you, please go ahead and use the Q&A function and put your questions there. We've got a couple in there already that I'd like to get started with. Before we do that, I want everyone to take notice on the slide here. We'd like you to interact with us. We'd like some feedback. We'd like to continue this conversation with you. One way to do that is sign up for our newsletter just to stay informed. Maybe you're not ready to consider this for your organization. In that center, if you scan that URL, that QR code, we have an assessment that we can do on how this might fit within your current program, whether it's your sales management approach and team, or it's your training program. We're happy to partner with you. Or if you want to look at some of the larger human capital services that Higher Echelon has, Steve Spalding, who leads the business development side there, can help you out with those opportunities. So let's take a look at the questions we have in the Q&A here. The first one we have here is a question about, and I'll send this to you, Dr. Winter. How do we break these habits of everything's always important? If we have a boss that says everything's important, how would I do this?
Yeah, that's such a great question. And because reality is that everything is important, but we can't do everything at the same time. So a great technique is to write out what those number one priorities are, take a look at them and see if you can order them in any way based on highest priority. The other thing you can do is, which one has the closest deadline. So sometimes we feel like maybe we work best when the deadline is approaching fast, and that could be true, but other times we may have a really big task to do that's going to take longer than just being procrastinating it. So that's one we might want to break up into several steps. And the other thing we can do is also know yourself and know what you want to work on and when you want to work on it. So doing certain things in the morning, maybe the harder things when you're freshest, and then saving some of the easier tasks for later in the day.
Fantastic. Thank you, Dr. Winter. So the next question here, I'm going to try to summarize some of the comments here that I can understand now why we hire so many salespeople that come out of sports and the military, because they naturally have some of these skills. But if I wanted to get started doing this with my organization, but they don't come from these typical profiles, how might we get started doing this? Or can we do this with that kind of a sales organization? I don't know, Dr. Winter, if you want to answer that, or Rob, if it's best, how would you guys approach that?
Yeah, Rob, do you want to take it first?
Sure. The short answer is, Troy, I think first off, you can start wherever your organization is on their journey with regards to training. This is something that can, you can integrate into all the other pieces, the methodologies, the processes, the product, all those parts I was talking about earlier. It's something that every organization can integrate in. And again, what I think the huge value is this becomes a life skill that the individuals can then take with them wherever they wind up going with their organization. Where and how you start, that's each organization is different. I think that's where the customization comes in. You mentioned an assessment. That's certainly one way to do it. Conversations with folks like us to kind of talk through that, to kind of get a better sense of where the sales team is, what their initial gaps are. I think that's a great way to kind of begin that journey. Angie, I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
Yeah, I just add that for human capital solutions, what we do, part of our solutioning process with any organization is to understand their needs. And so we start that needs assessment process either with a really formal deep dive with some key leader interviews, focus groups, and a survey, or we even do more informal interventions where we look at okay, just having a couple of prep meetings and asking questions so that we really understand what the needs of the organization is. None of our programs are off the shelf. What we do is customize our training for each unique customer, and we want to try to get them the best solution possible.
Fantastic. Thank you, Dr. Winter. I think we have time for one more question here. And this is one that actually hits home with me here. If you're self-aware and you know that your brain isn't at its best at, say, during certain times of the day, like that 3 p.m. crush that some of us get and we want to take a nap. What do you suggest doing during that time, or what can we do? Is the game time pause something that would help with that, Angie, or what kind of solutions? And is this the kind of problems that we can affect with cognitive skills training?
Yeah, it's such a great question as we're approaching that 3 p.m. Eastern time right soon. So yeah, absolutely. The game time pause can help, but the deep breath is honestly it's more of a calming. And so one of the things that we can do in conjunction with the deep breath is something energizing. So an example might be some progressive muscle relaxation where we do a little tense and release. And when we tense, we kind of activate the body, and then when we release, we let it go. But that process of tensing gives us a little boost of energy. So we want to think about something that boosts our energy, not just doing caffeine or something that's artificial, but something that can get our bodies and our minds kind of triggered back onto, hey, we've got a little ways to go here, we've got to continue focusing, and we want to finish strong. The other thing we can do is just get up and walk around a little bit, jump around a little bit. We want to get that blood flowing through the body and get the heart rate going again.
Fantastic. Great answer. Thank you, Dr. Winter. And thank you, Rob, again for your time. And thank you for everyone who joined us this afternoon. We look forward to hearing from you. Please give us some feedback on the webinar, and we look forward to working with you one-on-one and understanding more about how we can bring cognitive skills training to your organizations. Thanks, everybody. Have a wonderful day. There'll be a follow-up sent to this as well. So if you have questions, you can click on that follow-up, or if you want to go ahead and take one more picture here of that QR code here and follow up that way, you can do that. Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.